It's race day and our drivers are all out on the grid performing their final checks before we get underway here at the Bahrain International Circuit. We'll be racing around 3.36 miles of the magnificent Bahrain International Circuit today. Keep an eye out for drivers locking the front left down into the tricky braking zone of turn 10. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position. Sergio Perez lines up alongside. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Norris, Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso, Stroll, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Bottas, Albon, Sargent, Joe, and Pierre Gasly picks up the final grid slot. And now it's time to head down to the track. And alongside me today is a man who needs no introduction, but I'll try anyway. It's Ant Davidson. Look, we know it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But let's talk about the start now. What's there to help the drivers get away well?
Big pressure at the start of the race, Crofty, for all of them up and down the grid, no matter where you are. But the drivers these days, they practice, practice and practice. They have rigs with them at the circuit where they can sit down with the actual steering wheel from the real car, and they've got lights that they react to. The clutch paddle is tailored around the driver's hands, around their fingers, so they can have optimum position before they start. So there's so much thought and effort that goes into getting these cars off the line.
Okay, be careful with the front wing, you've taken some minor damage. Got front wing damage, recommend you box for a new one. Box now.
You always look back at a race like this and think, if I had just made that mistake there or locked up here, there would have been contact. And every one of those overtakes is a moment where you have to absolutely nail it, perfect it, and that's exactly what they were able to do today. Great stuff indeed.
Here come today's winners. The team at Red Bull have done a phenomenal job recently, and it's clear to see that they've put in the work, and they should be so proud of the victory they've secured here. Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one. It's race day, it's secure under the lights, and it's lovely to have you with us for the Bahrain Grand Prix. There's no shortage of passing opportunities around the 3.36 miles of the Bahrain International Circuit, with the best, of course, at turn 1, and then another soon after into turn 4. 15 corners here, 6 to the left and 9 to the right, and we could see 1 or 2 flat spots into that tight left-hander of turn 10. So with the race not far away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, and a very happy Carlos Sainz will start second. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Perez, Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Norris, Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Ricciardo, Sargent, Bottas, Magnussen, Joe, Ocon, Gasly, Albon, and Nico Hülkenberg rounds off the grid. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track. And alongside me today, a man small in stature but big on comment, Anthony Davidson. Hello. Now, you're the racing driver in this partnership, so tell us about this racing driver. Put us in their shoes. How are they going to be feeling?
Well, you've got to be prepared, Crofty. Before you even step foot inside the car, you've got to know, you've got to have a pre-race game plan. You've watched videos before you get into the car of previous races gone by. You know where you have to place your car if X, Y, or Z happens in front of you or behind you. So having this clear game plan
lap, final lap. Push, push. Gap to your teammate behind, 2.2 seconds.
Checkered flag.
I mean, it looked like they were in a different category at points during the race, led every lap. I mean, what more can we say?
Looking at the podium, you can see that red suit familiar to fans across the globe. A world-class win for a world-class team. Ferrari, do it again. It's been an absolutely wild weekend of Formula One action, and I can't wait to see what's next.